So the first thing I've done is, I suppose, quite controversial, and that is omit the Old Testament in its entirety. So I just start the Bible with Matthew's Gospel, albeit a slightly amended version, but I'll get onto that a bit later. The reason I've omitted the Old Testament is because it is just too different to the New Testament. So uh, it, there's a couple of big issues, really. One, the God in the Old Testament is very different to the God of the New Testament. Now, there are a couple of explanations for this. One is that people like me haven't read the Old Testament properly and or haven't understood it properly, and therefore are kind of caricaturing the differences between the Old Testament God and the New Testament one. And the other explanation is really it's an issue of two covenants: a covenant with the people of the Old Testament and a covenant with the people of the New. Yeah, both these points are legitimate, but I still think that they are too different. And the God in the Old Testament is very different to the Christ-centered God mentioned in the New Testament, and especially in St. Paul's letters and the Gospel of St. John. So that's a big reason. Also, um, from a kind of a theological point of view, it I do think the kind of a brownie point system of the Old Testament does not fit in with Christianity, like eating a certain food or not being able to eat certain food. Um, certain things you can or can't do, um, and that type of I would call it a brownie point system. It is not really applicable to Christianity anymore. As Paul said, that Jesus has replaced that. Well, I mean, what I would say is that there are a lot of stories in the New Testament that echo the Old, or written with the Old in mind. So I do realize that. So I haven't ignored that. I would just say the Old Testament is like an Arthurian legend, in the sense that these aren't stories that I would say are actual factual stories, but more the kind of myths and legends that Jesus and his disciples would have read. And that's how I really see the Old Testament. So in that case, I'm a bit of a Marcion.